Doctors, thank you for joining us. This is tip number 5 in our series of 5 pro tips for transitioning your practice. As we've mentioned in some of our other segments, when we decided to do, instead of our normal typical webinar that we've done, and many of you have probably dialed into over the years, often we'll do a webinar that will comprise 45 minutes to an hour. But we thought it might be helpful and interesting to take some of those topics and just break them into small 5 or 7 minute vignettes. They won't be obviously quite as comprehensive, but they'll give you some good solid information on which it'll start to get you thinking about some of the important aspects of transitioning your practice. As we discuss this, and as our team discussed it, and our marketing director, Megan, discussed this, we knew there were probably 50, maybe there's 500 different individual topics we could discuss as you think about transitioning your practice. But we wanted to focus this initial series on maybe 5 really important ones. We've done 4 already, and our 5th and final one in this series is just a kind of rhetorical question to the doctors. Am I really ready to sell my optometric practice? And this is more of a kind of a philosophical topic, I think. I'm not sure that anyone ever really knows the answer to it. Although there are many optometrists, and I've dealt with many of our colleagues around the country who, by the time they get ready to sell their practice, they're pretty sure that this is the thing to do. They're at a point in their life when they have other things in life they want to do beside practicing. Most everybody always tells me that at the end of their career that they have really enjoyed the 35 or 40 or 45 years of being an optometric physician. It's not that they're unhappy practicing. It's just that it's probably the right time in their life to sell the practice. It's a good time to get a return on all the money and the assets that they've built and put into their practice. And so you can't practice forever. There probably is a strong argument to be made that, a practice tends to age as the doctor ages. My patient base gets older. That tends to, not always, but it tends to change the revenue stream. So, sometimes for the better, often for the not so good. And so there is a point when the practice has probably reached a zenith of its value. It probably, if that period of time coincides with you and your thoughts about selling your practice, it's probably a pretty good time to try to engage in the active sale of a practice. It is a hard question to know because, to be honest with you, although I think this will change over the next 20 or 25 years as optometry becomes younger, as the younger millennials become more of the mainstay and the face of optometry. But for a certain generation of optometrists, practicing optometry also kind of defined who I was as a person. I've worked with several optometrists whose family members or spouses have told me that they were worried about their father or their mother, their brother or sister, that if they were to sell their practice and completely retire, that it might be difficult because in some cases, some optometrists really don't have any hobbies or avocations. Their life's work has been practicing optometry. They've been very good at it. It's been tremendously fulfilling. And so if I'm to sell my practice on a Friday, and when I wake up Saturday, I no longer own my practice, and maybe I'm not practicing optometry at all, that can be a little bit disconcerting. So starting to think about life after being an optometrist, because for many doctors, again, depending on your age and several factors, being an optometrist may really have defined my sense of self and who I am. So that's a big part of what I'm selling especially if I'm selling all of my practice. If I'm starting to phase out, if let's say that I've decided maybe I'm 60 years old and I've got an associate and I'm thinking of bringing that associate in as in some equity ownership capacity, with the understanding that young optometrist, that she will buy out the remaining interest in the practice over the next 5 to 8 years. Then a factor that I have to get my arms around is now I'm going to have another decision maker in the practice. And if I've been in a traditional solo practice, where I've maybe had a couple of associates work for me, but primarily I've been the sole exclusive decision maker in the practice. Giving up that responsibility can be difficult. If I had $1 for every conversation with a practicing optometrist, including my own father, who practiced for 52 years in Omaha, Nebraska, if I've had $1 for every optometrist who said, well, Bill, I'm going to sell Mary Jones. Well, I just want to sell Mary 49% of the practice. And right now, I think I want to keep that extra, couple percent. And many optometrists are not the least bit. They're unabashed about admitting that they want to, because they want to be able to continue to control the practice. They want the money for the 49%, but what they also want is the control. And that can happen in a short period of time. But I always counsel a seller that there will be a point in time, probably over the next 3 to 5 years, that Mary Jones is going to want to buy at least 1 more percent and have equal footing in the practice, and may well want to buy a majority share of the entity, so that she now has the exclusive decision-making authority in the practice. So that can be another thing that can be difficult. Some people can give up control easier than others. And I don't say this in any negative or pejorative way, but many optometrists are control people. Part of the reason they own their own practice and they own their own business is because they like to call the shots, not only in their personal life, but in their professional life. They don't want to work for anybody. They haven't worked for anybody for years. And that's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing. So as you start to think about, am I ready to sell? One of the things you should ask yourself is, what would a transition selling my practice look like? Am I a person who could have a partner? If I'm in my late 50s or early 60s and I've never had a partner, other than perhaps in life, but I've never had a professional partnership, or I've had a couple of failed partnerships before, then maybe I am a person who should really run my practice, control the entity, and sell all of it and walk away from it at some point in time. If I've not had a partner before, but I'm desirous of that both professionally and personally, then perhaps bringing in an associate in my late 50s and selling him or her some interest in the business, with the understanding that they will buy me out at some point in the future when I'm fully ready to retire, if not from the practice of optometry, but certainly from getting out from under the responsibilities of ownership of the business. Many optometrists, in fact, the preponderance of the optometrists that I've worked with, have loved practicing optometry. They love being an optometric physician. They love taking care of their patients' family, their children, their grandchildren. It's been a very rewarding thing, not only financially, but probably more importantly on a personal and professional level. And so selling all of my practice does not mean that I have to retire from the active practice of optometry. However, we did talk in one of our series that it is important, depending on how big the practice is and how much cash flow the practice produces, that when I sell the practice, my ability maybe perhaps to stay in the same capacity after the sale that I have obviously prior to the sale, that may have to change. But many optometrists sell their practice and end up staying on 1 or 2 days a week, sometimes more, depending on how big the practice is. But having an associate is a very good way, and it's a very standard, common way in a peer-to-peer transaction. Often my transition strategy plans are to take in an associate, find the right one, sell him or her some interest in the business, eventually make them a 50% partner, and then hopefully have structured in the deal that when I'm ready to retire, they will buy me out 100%. Because no matter how much that you like the practice of optometry, right, at some point, at some place in my life, I probably no longer want the sole and exclusive responsibility financially and legally for the business. So at some point, I may have other things I want to do. I have other places to use that money. Perhaps I've always wanted to own a boat or an airplane, or my significant other and I want to get a vacation home and get out of the terrible cold northern Wisconsin winters and perhaps move to the Southwest or the Southeast. And so I have other uses for that money. And so in order to convert that wonderful asset of my optometric practice into cash, means I'm probably at some point going to have to sell the practice. I hope that's been helpful. There's many other things in the transitioning of a practice that obviously we can't quite cover in 8 or 9 minutes, but hopefully those were helpful. There's many other things to consider, asset sale versus stock sale, and how all of that works in financing. If you'd like to discuss any of those things in more detail, I and my team at the Williams Group would be happy to discuss it with you. Hope you've had a great day and that this information was helpful. Thanks for dialing in today.